Welcome everybody, this is SharePoint Files and Practices General SharePoint Development Special Interest Group, and this is the bi-weekly sync. So we're going to talk about all of the non-client-side development stuff, mainly. That's typically what we're doing within this course. So we talk about CSAM APIs, we talk about REST APIs, PowerShell APIs, Microsoft Flow, Power Apps, and all of that stuff. So we do have two different special interest groups. One is for SharePoint Framework, and that's meeting also bi-weekly. And then we have this one where we talk about all of those end-to-end solutions and provisioning and all of this stuff. So this is more, let's say, random. So we've been talking about site designs and theme capabilities and column formatting and all of the new capabilities which are released in here. And then if you're really interested only on SharePoint Framework, you can concentrate on another special interest group call. On top of this, we also have a monthly community calls, which are then a summary on what has happened within a month. And we talk about more on user voice entries and all of that stuff. That happened actually during this week. So every single week we have at least one SharePoint community call, which is pretty cool actually, and then once a month we have two calls in a 1 week, so you can always select which of these you actually want to join. Now all of these are obviously getting recorded, and the video will be available in YouTube channel in 24 hours. Our SLA for that one is now pretty decent, so typically it is in 24 hours. Quite rarely it takes longer than that. AKMS SP Dev community is the Microsoft Tech community where you can actually ask questions around the SharePoint development. AKMS SP Dev Docs is the official documentation. We're going to talk about that one slightly later today in multiple areas. Now, if you're interested in participating, you can actually join on these calls and participate on the community. There's an opportunities for you to do live demos or show a technical pattern within this call. If you are more on the Microsoft Flow or provisioning side, then it would be this call. If it's the SharePoint Framework, then it would be the other call. We do have actually quite a big queue already, all the way until mid-August for people who want to actually do demos, because this is a great way for MVPs and people who want to be MVPs potentially to get visibility. Cool. Unbelievable that this happens every single Thursday. I even rebooted my machine just before this call. But anyway, so a few reminders: SharePoint Starter Kit, AKMS SP Starter Kit, or if you go to the GitHub, it's SharePoint Starter Kit as well. We have been evolving this documentation, and it will be evolving quite significantly by Ignite. So you will be able to see what are we doing openly in the GitHub as well. We are now started to work of having a real self-service website where you can sign in and basically just click a button to get the whole SharePoint Starter Kit provisioned to any tenant where you have signed in. And that's a really, really cool feature. In general, this contains a lot of awesome examples on the provisioning, how to build SharePoint Framework extensions, how to build SharePoint Framework web parts, and all of the source code and everything is available for you in here. So you can really easily reuse that code any way you want within your customization. So please remember to take a look on that. Good. SharePoint 2019. Dev platform. I showed this one already on the Tuesday's monthly community call as well. We talked about that slightly. There was an ask related on, hey, could we get this information to the docs, official docs, so people can actually reference that document while they're having discussions with their customers. And like I mentioned, it has now happened. So let me get that link. Where is my screen? So 1 second, I'm going to take the right link from the docs. So there is now an article which is what's new for SharePoint 2019 developers. There we go. So you can actually reference to that official article from Microsoft.
Vesa?
Yep.
Vesa, your screen, we're not getting updates. We're still seeing running.
I'm going to take over. Yeah, sorry for that. There we go. Now it should be working. Right, Chucks? Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Echo. Now, so the URL is now on the IM window. This is the SharePoint 2019 development platform. I just pushed it out 30 minutes before this call, and basically has exactly the same information as within the slide. But this helps you if you need to have a discussion with your management, your team, or your customer, or whoever, that there is an official document from Microsoft. Now, there is a disclaimer there. It is subject to change because, well, there might be some adjustments here and there still before the preview actually starts, and by RTM. So the preview starts on summer, so during the summertime, so relatively soon, and then it's still planned to go live later this year. What's really important to realize that the SharePoint 2019 is based on the SharePoint Online. What it means is that anything what we have in SharePoint Online by a certain time frame will basically, what can be working in on-premises might be or is available in on-premises as well. So as an example, the site designs and hub sites were released too late for getting them included in SharePoint 2019, because there was a timeline when it actually got forked from the SharePoint Online. Now, the SharePoint Online is already basically running SharePoint 2019. So it doesn't work in a way that there was a discussion in Twitter, so people were kind of confused on this one. Somebody was saying that, well, when will the SharePoint Online then upgrade it to SharePoint 2019? Well, that's not going to happen because there's no such thing as SharePoint specific version in Online anymore. There's only SharePoint Online, which we evolve on a weekly basis. And then from that version, we kind of fork on-premises version and we clean them up for the on-premises usage. So technically, when you will get your hands on SharePoint 2019, if you have a look on the assemblies, everything else, you will actually see quite a lot of signs of, for example, capabilities of hub sites and site designs, but those are explicitly now disabled in 2019, and there's no way for enabling them in there because they were not ready by the time when the fork actually happened. Now, good. On the SharePoint 2019, SharePoint framework version will be 1.4, which is a good thing to remember. And obviously, there will be the modern sites will be available, and you're able to provision modern sites, so modern team sites and modern communication sites. Obviously, those modern sites, team sites will not have group association with them, so it's only a modern site, so the modern experience. You can still use also Classic, so Classic is not going to go away. You can control which of the site types and everything else are available. So it is your choice when you start using the modern in SharePoint 2019. And then we'll keep on getting a new Yeoman version. So at the time when preview starts, it seems to be that there will not be a new Yeoman template version, which will have an explicit selection for 2019. But if you use a SharePoint Framework 1.4, that will be the matching version on the SharePoint 2019 side. Good. SharePoint Inception, that's a good comment, David. Yes, indeed. So technically, SharePoint 2019 is already running in SharePoint Online. That's what people need to understand. It's always cloud first, and then we take that version and push it in to the on-prem. Good. So Andy is actually having a good question. Sorry for that. Sorry, I'm going to jump on this one because we did a small update on the Angular story. So the Angular elements or the Angular element sample has been moved. So there is no more a specific repository for that. It's part of the samples in the SPDev webpod. So the URL is in the IM window. Just to jump on that. Now. So SharePoint Starter Kit, is it a double slide? Please have a look on this one. We're looking into also related on SharePoint 2019. We're looking into potentially have a separate version or a subset or a split the existing SharePoint Starter Kit in a way that those capabilities which will work in SharePoint 2019, you're able to take advantage in them in the on-prem. And I think there would be a demand for that. So we're looking into doing that within the Ignite timeframe. Now, checks. See, I created a nice slide for you. SharePoint makers.
Excellent.
And it looks like
so
you, right?
Yeah, it is me.
Yes.
That's how I look in the digital world. Whenever I work with SharePoint and Flow, I'm very cool, but Anyway, so
that is so subjective, Jax. It's starting. So and I can see your Mac. Yep. All good.
Excellent. So
I like your template.
I want to
what you're using. Never mind.
Exactly. It's just the best template that you can ever create in PowerPoint. Oh, there you go, SharePoint. So I want to give you updates. Things got released a few weeks ago, and probably just day before yesterday. So we released the Power Apps web part preview worldwide. So every tenant should be getting it. The preview tags, don't get confused with it. It's a way for us to make sure that whether things are working for customers properly, like accessibility and all other stuff. But the web part is fully supported in production, and you should be able to have your customers use it without any issues. If there are issues, you can get support for it. Just because there's a preview doesn't mean you don't get a support. So that's the big difference, and something that other web parts do have followed this model. So we are just following to ensure that we are able to give the best performance and other key tenets being met as we develop the part. Flow option, we did add one option to limit columns by view. So if you have a list and you have like 20 columns, but you're only focused on 5 columns in a specific view to work on a flow, then you could choose to use the option, get me the columns only by the specific view. I'll show you that. It's available for get files and get items. Releasing soon. So we showed both of these flows, SharePoint page approvals and remind me for date columns in SPCNA. The sessions are obviously not recorded, so I don't have a demo right now to show you guys. But so SharePoint page approvals is the way for having page approvals for modern pages. So if you have communication sites and team sites with modern pages, then you should be able to turn on content approval and use the page approval just like you would do in Classic, where now instead of publishing, you have submit page for approval, and it's all powered by Microsoft Flow. So you would be able to get a default template out of the box that should work for most of the simple cases. But if not, you can go edit that flow and add your business logic to it. So that's the flexibility we get by moving to a more modern flow platform. And then something we hear from time to time from customers is that, hey, I have flows, I don't know how to use it. My users are not, they really don't know what sort of things we can do, because it's a pretty different paradigm when you think about SharePoint Designer workflows, which was very restricted to a specific persona, and then now Flow being, available to users so they can be productive by building their own flows. So this is something where we have this thing called suggested flows. So in a list or a library, if you have a date column, then you would be able to quickly create a remind me flow for the date column so that you can be reminded. So for example, if you have a document library with a contract date, and then you'll be able to create remind me flow straight away from the library and say, remind me 2 days before the contract date, right? So that's something you want to keep track of. And you don't want to create a task. You don't want to create anything. I mean, of course, the flow is there. You can go edit and add a plan task or whatever you want. But this one is a very simple, straightforward way, like the request sign off, where you just go and use it and it'll remind you about that contract document before 2 days. And as Vesa said, we are doing documentation effort. We want to bring in the same documentation we have for web parts and extensions, the format, how we take users through the journey of creating web parts and what web parts are through the documentation. So we are doing the same for Flow and Power Apps. So I'll quickly show the Power Apps web part. So this is a Power Apps web part where I have embedded Power App in my site. Now, many have asked, hey, what is this? This is not responsive and all those stuff, but we are just leveraging the options available in Power Apps. This is a portrait app. That's why it's basically utilizing the space and you have a white space. We do have some updates that we would push maybe in 1 or 2 months, where you can position this app either on the left or center or on the right, so it aligns with your content. Right now we have the ability to embed an app and then show a border. So most of the apps, what we found, didn't have a border, so they didn't really play along nicely with the page content. So we added the show border as at least a minimal thing that we wanted to, go ahead with the release. So there are more options coming up so that it aligns well within the page. And then here's the option I talked about, limit columns by view. So I'm connecting to a list in my site, and you can see it actually gives me the different views I have. And then when you do execute this action, you only get specific properties from that columns from that view. Same for get files, which is basically connecting to a document library. So it's a very neat update. I like this update quite a lot. Many customers have asked about this because otherwise you would see your properties, dynamic content property window like very long, right? So this can restrict, and you don't have to filter query or anything of those sorts. So pretty cool. So that's the update, Vesa.
Cool. So a few questions came on the thing. There was and please don't. You can stick on that because there's a pretty long slack on the updating of the screen for me as well. Now there was a few questions. Will Power Apps web part be available in all Office 365 subscriptions? I think the answer is on those where the Power Apps in general is enabled. So
yeah.
It's technically not all, but all of those where Power Apps is available. So it has
the Power Apps web part. I think the Power Apps web part will be available everywhere, but we are not looking or tied to Power Apps service because it's something the author has to find the app and embed, at least for now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Cool. Then there was a release around those releasing soon. There was a Rolf asked a question released by Ignite. I think the answer is sooner than Ignite. So what you have in the releasing soon. So the Ignite statements and Ignite stuff is something which we actually haven't disclosed yet. So there are certain things which our marketing wants to keep us hiding by Ignite. So in the Ignite you will hear, "Oh my God, you're doing this as well." So okay. And then embedding mode, AKL is asking around that one.
Embedding mode, what does that mean? Are you asking if it's an iframe or not? It is an iframe. It's basically the same concept of how you would embed a Power App web part on a website, but we are doing some heavy lifting of authentication and tokens and caching and all those stuff that will make performance and many other things better than just using a, say, content embed web part.
Yeah. And then there was a question from Flexi, will the workflow be able to export in the future? So I think this relates on the flow and discussion.
Yeah, so you can export the workflow today. You can import them manually. You have to go and change the actions manually. But it certainly works 100%. It's supported from flow side. The only thing that we don't have today is the packaging and deployment story, and that's something we are working on. I don't have any updates on that.
Yeah. Now, moving on things. So first, a person on the actual.
I saw one question.
Oh,
I saw one question from Akhil. Is there going to be possible to pass info to Power App web part? So, Splat, Vesa team is working on the dynamic data. So once that gets released and stabilized, we will be using it in the Power Apps web part as well to pass information to Power Apps.
Oh, have we promised to do it? No, just kidding. Just kidding. Absolutely. We're working on it. And the dynamic data is in preview already in 1.5 of SharePoint Framework, but there's no UI layers. So the UI layer is still under development and design. But absolutely, that's going to be there. Now, let's move to the demos. Mike, I saw you in a call earlier.
Yes. Yeah, can you hear me?
Excellent, all good, microphone works. You can actually do the intro of the demo as well. So let's start with you because we needed to leave earlier today and then go to Daniel after that.
Yeah, so I'm Mike Amerlin. I work on the Office Ecosystem Marketing team. I'm that marketing contact that Vesa was just disparaging.
Yes, I realized that you're in the call, and I was actually mentioning that. So.
Yeah, hold yourself there, bud.
Yes.
I'm going to report
Mike,
you.
I love you.
Yeah. So I'm just going to do a quick demo, of some new things that we've developed and put out there in conjunction with our Windows friends and the folks at Canvas. So it really starts with this idea and this pattern that we're seeing a bit more broadly take hold, which is this idea that, when you are developing an application, and everyone can see my screen, okay? I take it? hopefully?
Yep, all good, all good.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Just making sure. It started with this idea that, typically what you'll see is, in a company, of course, in this case, a real estate company, we have a number of properties that we're managing, the different houses that we have to, maybe go and maintain and then maybe go sell to the audience. And of course, in real estate, it's about houses, but in, maybe healthcare, it's about patients, and in finance, it's about proposals and portfolios. But, there's always these kind of core objects that you want to collaborate on. And, in Office 365, there's this concept called a group. And associated with your group, of course, as you all know, you get all these really great collaboration tools. You get your SharePoint modern site that comes with that. You get, for example, some collaboration capabilities with Planner, the ability to have tasks. Of course, there's Microsoft Teams, so if you want to have conversations with external participants, every group has this sort of powerful set of collaboration capabilities such that it makes sense that when you're building out your line of business applications, in this case, the real estate application, of course, you've got your property and you've got some information about that. But, what you want to be able to do is weave in different collaboration tools into your capability. And if you just tie this object, this house in this particular case, to a group, you can start to pull in these capabilities like conversations, of course. In this case, it comes from group conversations, but actually there's some new, Microsoft Teams beta APIs, so you can start to work with chat. Of course, there's things like tasks. So in this case, you can add and remove tasks that are associated with this property, and that would get stored behind the scenes inside of a Planner dashboard. But then, of course, one of the very key capabilities is this idea of files, which is, everything that you're ever going to collaborate on is you're going to want to store some files associated with it, and you're going to want to get all the compliance benefits, all the storage benefits of actually storing them behind the scenes inside of SharePoint. Anyway, all this to say that the pattern of tying all the different objects that you may have to a group behind the scenes that you automatically provision so that you can get this collaboration goodness from Office 365 seems like something that we want to kind of go ahead and promote. And we are seeing some customers and some partners doing it. So, for example, Bentley is an engineering company, and they do civil engineering, things like roadway projects, tunnels, those kinds of things. And for a number of their projects, they have things whereby they tie that into a group, and then they get all the teams and the benefits that come from that. So a really good pattern. So we are essentially making a modest start. And so what we've done is actually over in the the Windows team has something called the Windows Toolkit, which is basically their open source repository for Windows, open source tools and additional controls. Now, these are typically universal Windows controls, UWP controls as they're referred to. In fact, this used to be referred to as the UWP Toolkit. It's now the Windows Toolkit. And what you'll see in the Windows Toolkit when I go over to it is, just a number of standard controls and those kinds of things. They've got a pretty great engineering team working on maintaining this, but of course they take your contributions as well. And one of the things we wanted to do was actually to start to add Microsoft Graph controls into this Windows Toolkit so that, there's more ready-to-go building blocks if you're building a UWP type of application. Now, one of the things that we announced at Microsoft Build a month and a half ago was another idea, which is this idea that UWP controls can actually be hosted in other types of applications as with something called XAML data islands. So you can actually take these Windows these UWP controls and actually host them in a Win32 application or a WinForms application or a WPF application as well. So, in a sense, even if you're not developing a UWP application, if you're developing just a general Windows application, these graph controls can work there as well. And so, we're working towards that. So for our initial set of controls, this is the Windows Community Toolkit sample app. This is kind of the general sample application that comes, with this open source repository, and you can see all the different types of controls that are available for it. But we're working to go ahead and add a number of different graph controls. And so we have a starter set of 4 controls, the fundamentals in terms of being able to log into Azure Active Directory, to do things like, pick people and to see a profile card. And then we're also adding that SharePoint file list control. This is just a sort of a control demo application. You can do different things to kind of test the controls out. In my case, let's just go show you the SharePoint file list control. Again, we think that this is something that, you can add to a Windows application to make it easy to connect to files that are maybe then in turn connected to the group that you have, associated with your collaboration objects. So in my case, I'm going to go paste in my client ID. Now, if you're not familiar with Azure Active Directory, you can get a client ID by just going to apps.dev.microsoft.com. In this case, I have one called Windows Toolkit Graph Registration Test. I created it in, essentially 30 seconds. You can go there, you can create one of these identifiers for free. You say that it's going to run on a native application platform, and here I give it a default set of permissions that are made available. From there, I get this magic identifier, which is how my application is identified, and I'm off to the races with building this graph application that connects to Azure Active Directory. So I'm going to go sign in inside of this demo application, and what this will do is then allow me to go ahead and pick the graph, the URL of the drive that I'm looking to connect to. Now, what it's going to take here is a graph URL to actually go find this. So graph.microsoft.com, I know how to spell that, /v1.0/me/drive. So this is essentially the URL endpoint of my OneDrive, and then I'm going to go click Load Drive. So what this is going to do is it's going to go past that URL to my SharePoint file list control. And so from here I see just a very simple file list. It doesn't have all the accoutrements, if you will, of File Explorer, so there's not a ton of things here. But one of the nice things about this is it uses a lot of the capabilities of the files APIs that are inside of Microsoft Graph. So, for example, I can drill into this NES MRI folder here. I can select a scan image. When I click on the image itself, it's going to actually give me a few of the properties. It's going to reuse this profile card capability that we have. The other thing it's going to do is it's going to leverage the Graph Thumbnails API. So one of the nice things about that is you can take all the thumbnail functionality that OneDrive has up in the cloud. It can do over 300 different file formats, including things like X-ray file formats, those kinds of things, and it'll give you a thumbnail preview, so you can create a kind of a nice, rich user experience for it. You can do other things with this control. It will has a share functionality, so you can go ahead and get a sharing link that you can then go embed into things like emails and your if you want to share maybe a link to this file. It does also have upload functionality as well, so you can go ahead and upload different types of files and get them submitted into there. So it'll do that asynchronously and load them up to upload them into your particular drive that you're working with. There's some configuration in terms of things like the size of the page. You can control the user experience that you'll see when you first click on a file. So that detail pane that we were showing you, now I can have it show up down there. We probably need to fix that bug a little bit. But you can essentially configure the user experience a little bit based on what makes sense for your application. And of course, because it's a XAML control, you ultimately have the .xaml file so that you can then go ahead and override the user experience and really tailor it to the way that you want to see it. So this is just a very simple control for working with the list of SharePoint files and how you can go from there. You can also override a number of the messages and those kinds of things. So we think of this as really just a start, but we hope to make it easy to the broader audience of Windows developers, to go ahead and get started, and for them to go ahead and be able to, just add a SharePoint file list control that connect it to your OneDrive or to connect it to other different assets. And if you have ideas for improvements, it's open source, and of course you can make pull requests as well. Just taking a look at the code over here, you'll see that this comes from the repository. There's a controls library over here. The SharePoint file list itself is actually pretty compact in terms of the amount of code it has. This is just a very simple snippet of code that when a list is changed, it will go ahead and update the detail pane with different types of information. So in this case, for example, what it's going to do is it's going to go use the Microsoft Graph SDK when an item changes to go retrieve the set of thumbnails for a file and then go populate them into the XAML components inside the pane. So just to give you a sense of this, under the covers, what this does is it's using the Microsoft Graph SDK to call Microsoft the Microsoft SharePoint Graph APIs to go retrieve different types of files and file information and just populate them into the XAML. So fairly simple and straightforward to get started. Let me just show you very briefly, how you can actually go build your own application, just to show you how simple it is. So in this case, I've got a very hello world universal Windows control application. And so the first thing that I did inside of this was that I instantiated kind of this singleton object called Microsoft Graph Service. I specified which type of authentication model to use. In this case, we want to use the V2 Microsoft Graph endpoints. And then I essentially initialize this with the set of, that graph application identifier that I got earlier from apps.dev.microsoft.com, and just some other properties about the kind of services and properties I want to go ahead and use inside of this graph service. And essentially then what I did is in the XAML, I embedded two controls. One is my login control. In order to use the SharePoint Files control, you're going to want to have the user log in first. And so typically, either when your application first starts up, you're going to want to say, hey, user, please go log in. Or, with a sort of a profile card in the upper right-hand corner of your application, you want to let people sign in optionally. And then once they sign in, they get all that graph-powered functionality sort of, lit up inside their application, because now they can sign in and get that information. So in this case, it's fairly simple. Beneath that login control, I have the simple SharePoint Files list control, just some simple properties to go ahead and get that started. And behind the scenes, essentially, once the login has happened, once the sign-in is completed, I pass in a drive URL, which is, again, in this case, going to simply pass, connect to my personal OneDrive by passing in the graph URL of my OneDrive. We actually have a helper API in here, so if you want to convert a SharePoint URL into the equivalent graph, drive URL, you can do that. Or if you've got, a group, or if you've got a SharePoint site, if you've got that API through Microsoft Graph, it's pretty easy to get a drive for that. Essentially, every document library in a SharePoint site is the equivalent of a drive. So it's fairly straightforward with the SharePoint Graph APIs to get those drive objects. So in this case, again, it's just the Hello World application, not too complicated, but hopefully it shows you that with a few lines of code, if you're a Windows developer, you can actually go and embed, fairly simple, graph components, and in this case, the SharePoint Files control. So in this case, I'm going to go click the profile control here. You can imagine more UX here around saying, please log in, or you're not logged in, those kinds of things, like so. Now, what this will do is it'll pop up my sign-in dialog once that happens. It's loading some debug code here in the background, I think. Oh, now since I've already signed in before, it actually isn't going to pop up that dialog. I've already signed into this application, so it just can reuse that automatically and sign me in. And then here you get the SharePoint Files experience that we're looking at just earlier, complete with the, the preview functionality as well. So it's sort of a bigger control that will, do things like show previews and show the ability to work with files. So that's a little bit of how you get started with these, new graph controls for accessing SharePoint data. We're actually working towards, expanding these as well, and we hope that, there will be more contributions over time. We're hoping to have, a good, healthy arsenal of different controls that you can embed, different Lego blocks to build sort of graph and SharePoint powered, rich native applications. So in this case, as we mentioned, we do have the login, the people picker, the profile card, and the SharePoint files in UWP, currently exposed. They're both in the repository, the GitHub repository that you'll see there, but there's also a NuGet package that you can get. So I didn't show that, but my Hello World application, if you just get the, the Windows Toolkit graph NuGet package, then you'll get everything you need to go, to get started and working with that. We're adding a planner task control fairly soon. So this planner task control, what it will do is, essentially that task, provide a very simple task experience. So if you want to go add a task, as you're working on your different properties or your different healthcare patients or your engineering projects, you can add them into your UWP application and they'll be reflected in Planner behind the scenes. We're also adding Power BI. Now, Power BI is not really graph powered per se. It does use Azure AD to sort of sign in and to manage permissions, but because of some requests that we had, we want to make it easy to basically take the Power BI embedded components, which are basically web-based, and essentially, do the work to iframe them into, a UWP application as well. The other thing that's going to happen is, as I mentioned, with the XAML Data Island, technology, you can actually expose these controls into Win32, WPF, and WinForms. In order to do that, you need some wrappers that basically, thunk the APIs, if you will, from UWP into the corresponding equivalent in those different environments. And so we're working to develop those wrappers to make it very easy for you to embed those components into other applications as well. So if you've got that WinForms application that you want to, dust off and add more, SharePoint magic into, you can do that as well. So the Canvas team, really took the lead in developing a lot of these controls. So Alex Chen, Manfred Wittenballs, Damien Gibbs, and Hubert Sui. And I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple of other folks as well, but they did a lot of the development and, ran it through the gauntlet of getting it into the Windows Community Toolkit. But it is open source as well. So if you're looking to support or, add components to it, or if you've got a Windows application that you're looking to update, you can do that as well. Just one last thing, it is also an application in the Windows Store. So you can actually go to the Microsoft Store and actually go download this application as well and start playing with it if you so choose. So you can download the Windows Community Toolkit sample application. You don't even need to, download the GitHub repo and compile it. You can even install it on your Xbox One. In fact, I did that this morning. And I was, working with SharePoint Files directly on my Xbox One as well. So, the dream is really true. You can do that if you so choose in addition. So that's just a sort of a brief whirlwind tour of this new SharePoint Files control. And, I would say this pattern of, connecting line of business applications into an Office 365 group, so that you can get all these cool collaboration capabilities, inside of, your applications. So yeah, let me go see if there's questions.
There wasn't actually that many questions, comments, feedback. People are happy on the AKMS naming. But the link has been now shared, and please let us know what you think on this. Absolutely. Now that started in my mind. I started thinking that we should have something similar, for example, for JavaScript implementation as well. All of that. So, but it's part of this longer journey on getting controls from more mature. So
yeah, okay. No, absolutely. I was going to say that as well. I think it, especially now with the graph support that's getting, that's in beta preview and in SharePoint framework. I think there's a great opportunity to have, that similar task control that we have for making it easy to just quickly pop in a task and have it show up in the right place in Planner. That totally makes sense to have as, I would almost say as just a more general React control that, yes, of course, works great in SharePoint framework first and foremost, but it's just a great library of, pure, if you will, pure React controls that developers can go access and embed maybe even in their own other web apps as well.
Yep. Absolutely. Now, Daniel, you can actually start sharing your screen, so we don't actually lose any time because you have a really cool demo coming up as well. So thanks, Mike, for that one. And like said already so many times, please keep us feedback coming so we know what do you like about these things and is it useful or not, and all of that. So, but Daniel has a really cool demo related on Microsoft Flow and artificial intelligence and automation of stuff in the SharePoint UIs without really a code, right? Right, Daniel?
That's exactly right.
Excellent. So please take it away, and let's. I'll jump in the end for asking any random questions. So thanks.
Okay. All right. What I'm going to do is, due to lack of time, I'll just jump straight into the demo, and then after that, if you have time, I'll walk you through all the behind the scenes and how I got over there. So first things first is all I have is the SharePoint Online site. Nothing fancy about it, and I have a library over here in which I'm dropping these images. The library itself, I already did a test. I've gone ahead and added an image over here. Did some simple fancy things over here. I went ahead and factored in the JSON. So in this image, my flow basically goes ahead and puts in some information, and we'll look into that. So there's this view, and then there's also the tile view or the images view. So let me walk into the demo, and then I'll basically show you all that's going on over there. So let me show. Okay, all right. So what I have over here is some images. The first one that I'm going to drop was already the one for the little puppy over here. Let me go and drop another one, and then we'll just basically see that once I drop the image, there's a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes, and we'll take a look at that. So the way I built my flow was so that once the images come in, it's a new item added to the library, and then that's what kicks off the flow. And so after the flow is completed, basically it'll go ahead and get some information from me, and it'll add that. So let's go ahead and see whether the flow has completed. So I came in over here and I went ahead and refreshed it. As you can see that it has started putting in some information, but I want to go ahead and just refresh it because that's what's happening. There's a flow running in the backend, and the flow needs to finish off So I'm just going to keep doing that, and in fact, we can go ahead and see where in this flow. All right, so this flow seems to have failed. All right, that's fine. We'll go ahead and put in another information over here, and we'll just see what happened. Great, the demo gods really are against me today. All right, so you know what? I was going to do that as a simple example to see that that was just a normal image that came in. But after that, let's actually go ahead and put in a few more images, because that's where I want to go ahead and now start the process of policing images. And so what happens is, back when there was the SharePoint conference over there, one of the things that was actually announced was the very fact that you can go ahead and factor in not just machine learning, but go ahead and factor in the whole cognitive services to take your SharePoint, SharePoint to the whole new level. And that was great because SharePoint already came with data loss prevention, which was huge. But I just found that there was this gap, and the gap was some way where I can police not just the images, but also the text that was coming in. And so that is what I love about Flow and all its connections that we are able to make, and go ahead and incorporate that into SharePoint, because that's exactly what I've done over here. Is now I'm able to go ahead and fill in that gap, which is a way for me as a SharePoint admin to actually moderate or police these images that are coming in. And the only way I can do that is using the data connection with Content Moderator. So Content Moderator is actually part of Cognitive Services, but it's one of the newer ones that have come out, is because the Content Moderator does use machine learning, and it is able to police, for lack of a better word, with text moderation and video moderation and also images. For this scenario, I'm actually only using image moderation, but you can actually do the exact same text moderation. For example, there's a conversation list where you go ahead and put in some of these conversation lists. Flow will kick off, take that text, go ahead and run that by content moderation to see if any of these texts have anything to do with being racy or being adult. So that is how I was able to fill in that one little gap which I found in SharePoint, and the team did a fantastic job, because they were able to go ahead and inculcate Flow as part of a list now or a library. And now, thanks to Flow and its data connections, I was able to factor in the content moderator. So let's go back over here and we'll try another demo. And this time I'm going to actually factor in or put in some more images. So the first one I'm going to put in is this image. And I'll, go ahead and add another image as well. So now I'm just doing the whole drag and drop. So we'll see. Hopefully, these will have run.
Let's cross the fingers that the demo gods are with us.
Yeah, no kidding.
It always happens. You try 5 times and it works in 5 times, but then in the demo it goes fine. So
all right, so yeah, this one completed. Yeah, completed. And it's funny because while the first, while you guys were going through the slides, my computer installed updates. So that's why I lost the connection. I went ahead and rebooted. And I was like, oh, this is just not working out very well today. All right, so the first one went ahead and completed. The second one has also gone ahead and finished. And those are the 2 new images that we have. And so what I'm actually now waiting for is some emails to come through, and they did. So let's take a look at these images, all right? So first one, the image came in, and let me just open that up. The email came in. I don't want to view in the browser. But this image is basically everything that I've been looking for. It says when the image was uploaded, and it's basically just saying that, hey, Daniel, it potentially could have some medium level adult or racy content. And then it gives me the score that the adult content is about 12%, the racy content is about 83%. I've also factored in the cognitive custom vision to go ahead and tag these images. So it just tells me that, hey, this image it's been tagged this way. And then finally, it's just saying that, chances of this might be a misunderstanding, how it's best that you take a look at it. And then directly from the email, I can go ahead and click on the link, and it takes me straight to that image, which I'm going to see. So that was the actual first image, a bunch of people just going ahead and jumping into the lake over there. But let's take a look at the second email that came through as well. The second email, this one has been highlighted a little red. And it's over here telling me that the adult score is about 81%. So it's getting really close to, what I categorize as the first image was probably just a PG-13 type of an image. The second one is getting very close to an R-rated image because the adult score over there is about 81%. One thing right at this point I want to call out that racy by definition is not the same as racist. Racy particularly talks about, is this an adult or is it a PG-13 type of image? That's a very important difference that you need to know, because there's always this misunderstanding that, hey, is it a racy or is it a racist? Is the system part smart enough to know that? So no, it is two separate things. Adult and racy is what the image over here and the system is looking for. So let's go ahead and now take a look at back to the list. I'm going to go ahead and actually already went ahead and refreshed it. So the list over here, thanks to using a little bit of JSON in the list itself, I was able to now go and see which one of them is normal. So the one that's normal is just light green. The other ones that's racy, or actually I put that in as green. But any of them which its moderation was over 90% or 0.90 or 90% or more, I was able to go ahead and label that as well over here, because now I need to know which one of these is something that I need to monitor. And then also anything which is 0.70 or 70% and higher, be it adult or racy, that's when the email goes out to whoever is going to be the person moderating this police area over here. So that is basically the demo over there. Now let's go ahead and take a look at exactly the flow. And in the flow, actually, because we don't have too much time, I am going to just give you an overview of how the flow worked. And then in the end, well, actually, so let me go ahead and minimize that a little bit.
So, Dan, I think you did a blog post on this as well, right?
And I was going to post that. That's what I was going to talk about that in the end is, I know this time we don't have too much time to deep dive into it, but nothing to worry about if this thing catches your interest. I've got a full blog written on that, plus I've handed off the entire flow templates, copy of the list, all the images and everything, so you guys can take a look at it. All right, so in the first section of this, the flow itself, all I'm doing is when the image comes in, it goes ahead and gets the file content. I went ahead and put in a little bit of delay, that's my own personal preference. You don't need to do that. Adding a little bit of delay is something that I've been doing. Then I go ahead and send that image over to content, to the vision, the custom vision over there, because that's how I get the tags. Because regardless of if the image is PG-13 or if it is R-rated, I at least want the tags to come in, and that way I can go ahead and always tag my images. That's one of the demos that was also showed in the SharePoint Conference North America. Then what I'm doing is after I go ahead and take, anybody know the shortcut to go ahead and get my image back from the magnifying? Does anybody know that?
ESC typically helps, but yeah, good question.
Oh boy.
I don't use that. I use Zoom It exactly for these reasons, to be honest. So
Steven says Control-0.
Control-0 could be the thing.
0.
No. Zoom It is much better on these things. No offense for the native thingy. Controls.
Let me go back. Get that guy. There we go. There we go. All right.
Cool.
So after that, one thing that I'm doing on my flow side is, I'm going ahead and updating the files. Just make sure that at least the tags are there on that library. But then, regardless of if it is below that 70%, I go ahead and at least update some of those tags and that information into that SharePoint list. That's all that I'm doing over here. If it's below 70%, go ahead and add those tags to that SharePoint list because I want to keep a notification of that. Then the other things that I'm doing over here is to make sure that if it is over 70%, then find out, is it over 80% or is it over 90%? Based on that, those emails are distributed, and that's how I'm getting those two different types of emails. One of the emails, if you noticed, was actually telling me that this was a medium level severity, and that's how I was able to, using some little quick HTML, for which I always use w3schools.com, just to make sure that the flow comes out a little bit more cleaner. And then if you look at the the potentially high, I just went ahead and cleaned that up to make it a little bit more saying hi over there. So that's basically the flow in the back end and how that's running, all making sure that I've got the data connection to Content Moderator and pulls that information over here. I know we've only got 4 minutes left, so I want to call out some key things on Content Moderator because that was something that I assumed, but I was actually wrong about that. So let me go and show that in the Content Moderator, I've gone ahead and signed up. I went ahead and got my the connections, and I went over there. But the one thing that I misunderstood was the tagging, because in the tagging, Content Moderator is smart enough to go ahead and do the tagging. It'll actually go ahead and already put in the is adult over there for you automatically, is racy for you automatically. But I can go ahead and add as many more tags. And then I assumed that using Flow, I can go ahead and get my own custom tags directly from Content Moderator. Now, right now, I was able to reach out to the content moderation team, and they said that this is right now a gap in the connection with Flow, that it will only get 2 out-of-the-box tags, which is the adult and racy one, but they are working on being able to go ahead and pull all these other tags as well. So with Flow, for your SharePoint images, you can then have your own tags over here, and then you can go ahead and save those on your SharePoint documentary as well. And so that was one thing over there. And then the final thing, as we talked about, I have this whole thing documented for you guys. It's all available over here. And in the in the blog itself, which is on the Power Apps Flow community, I have a video which walks through all of it, put in the links, good information over here. And then finally, to make it all easier for you, I have a combination of the SharePoint list, the images that I went ahead and used for testing, and some of the whole flow itself on the zip file. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in over here. Put that in the chat. Oh, there you go. That was already there.
Yeah, so I was too fast. That's my task.
Perfect.
So.
No, that's excellent. Thank you. That makes it a lot easier over there. So yeah, in a nutshell, all I did over here was go ahead and create a simple SharePoint images library. The library by itself in the default tiles, this is all that you see over there, images coming in. And I went ahead and made sure that I had some good examples for you guys. But in the back end, when I have in the list in a different view, thanks to some JSON type of coding, which you can ignore that for this one over here. But using the flow, I'm able to go ahead and get the tags. But the key one was using the new Cognitive Services Content Moderator. I can, for the first time now, police these images that are coming in. And if anything, it looks a little bit more suspicious. It immediately sends this type of emails over here. And the emails basically just say that, hey, we just thought that this was a higher level of severity based on the percentage scores over here. But you know what? It might just be a mistake. So go ahead and take a look at it. And then you guys can go ahead and make a decision that if this is racy or whatnot over there. So that, in the nutshell, was how I was able to leverage Flow. And go ahead and leverage all the capability because I just thought that was a little bit of a gap in the moderation which I needed in SharePoint. But finally, thanks to Flow and the integration of Flow and SharePoint, even that gap is filled. And now I can really do a good job policing all the content which is uploaded, things such as images and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's
any questions?
Super cool demo, absolutely a great demo. And like you said, we chatted slightly before we started the session. This didn't really require that much code, or basically at all. It was just configuration, right, in Flow and in the artificial intelligence side.
Absolutely, and the key thing was these connectors and Flow on its capability to talk to SharePoint. Because all of these images over here that are coming in and the flow steps that I'm putting in over here, and plus, when you guys take a look at it, you'll see that I'm just putting in some simple conditions that, hey, if through Flow was the adult classification less than 0.70, and this adult classification over here thing is just, taking one of the steps or the actions directly from that connection over here. Yeah. No heavy, code over here, no big formula, no expression, nothing. It's just all out of the box. And I joke with people that if you are an Excel person who knows all the formulas, then you're by default going to be a really good Flow user because you already figured this out. So,
yes. Yep. And obviously there's nothing wrong of writing code as well, but it's always better if the requirement of writing code isn't too high or too low, which way we want to actually say that. So, but basically you can do a lot of stuff without the code as well. Then if needed, you can always extend this thing things by adding a code. So really great stuff. We're going to add obviously all of the links in the video notes. So if somebody watching this through YouTube, you can find the in the later on when we get the recording available, and you can find the links and everything else from the video notes. Now, that's it for this one. We once again ran the full hour, and we didn't have really time for Q&A. Again, we're really trying to make that work in these calls. But the next general SharePoint Dev SIG meeting is on July 26th, and the following SharePoint Framework Special Interest Group call is in 19th of July. Personally, I will not be in either one of these, most likely because I will be on family vacation. I've been waiting for this for a year, so I need to actually take some time off. But Patrick and Bert and Jax and Mike and whoever is going to actually host, and Irvin and Paolo who's going to host these upcoming calls as well. And the recordings will be available in the YouTube still. But thank you everybody for joining, and we'll be absolutely in touch. I will, like I said, I'm heading for 3 weeks vacation personally, so I will be slightly slower probably, or quieter in the social media for upcoming weeks, but I'll be back in early August, and all of the other guys are pretty much working during this time, with certain exceptions. But thank you everybody for joining. Thank you Daniel and Mike already left. Mike for the great demo as well. If you're interested on contributing and being part of these demos, just reach out to me, Jax, Patrick or Bert or whoever in the team, and we'll set you up a demo spot in the upcoming calls. And please keep on sending us feedback. Let us know if something isn't working properly. Thank you everybody. We'll be in touch. Bye-bye.